Chairman, we do have Councilman Secret online is working on getting.
Okay, welcome everybody. I'd like to call a meeting to order for City Council Committee of the Whole on the budget. Anyone that's online or public or staff ask you to mute your devices unless they need to speak on an item. I'll ask any public or staff to turn off their cell phones as well. And when making public comment, clearly identify yourself. With that, yeah, May 22nd. 2024. Yeah. Committee of the Whole. So we have a clerk to read this first item in, or does the
Number 21, ordinance, second reading, appropriating monies for the city of Cheyenne, Wyoming for the various purposes in conducting the municipal government of said city and fixing the amount of general and special taxes as part of the revenue required to meet the said appropriation, all for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2024 and ending June 30th of 2025.
Okay, and with that, I guess we'll go to the mayor for a staff report.
Mr. President, members of the Committee of the Whole, good evening. It's really nice to be at this point in the budget process. Simply said, you have a balanced budget before you with general fund reserves and expenses of $71,647,647, which is an 8% increase from the previous fiscal year's budget. Our top revenue sources again this year are sales and use taxes, followed by property taxes, direct distribution from the state, gas and electric franchises, federal mineral royalties, historic horse racing, severance taxes, building permits, vehicle taxes, and gas taxes is our top 10. In this budget, we have proposed adding a few key employees to our team. 2 new positions are proposed for the compliance department to help with the ongoing challenge of cleaning up after the homeless population. It's been a team effort from various departments handling these duties to this point. But as Eric has pointed out in his testimony to this committee, we really need a team specially trained in how to deal with biohazards and needles. We're proposing 2 additional police officer positions again this year. We've recently had a lot of hiring success, and today we are fully staffed. Adding positions will help with our growing city, preparing our manpower for potential large annexations, and help with the department in fighting crime. Creating a team that can just focus on crime trends identified by the crime analyst will greatly enhance our ability to respond to the ever-changing nature of crime in our community. I emailed you all an ordinance yesterday proposing the critical neighborhood speed program. It will require our traffic division to install and move radar feedback signs in the areas designated for increased policing. We're proposing an additional traffic technician to help manage this program and the additional miles of roadways we've added in the last few years. Signs, signals, and road paint in these new areas need additional staff to be kept up with. Community recreation and events has 12 diverse divisions. Ouch. And we're proposing to replace the office manager that was lost in the reduction of force during the COVID pandemic. They need help to manage the day-to-day operations and keep the office open during business hours. CRE is also asking for an aquatics maintenance technician and an events technician. Their operations are not Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. These positions will help them manage the many long days the community expects them to be in operation. The last request for full-time employment is a staff engineer. The city is growing and the engineers department is involved in the reviews from housing development to commercial and industrial projects. It is our goal to improve the customer service by reducing staff review times. Creating the new surface water drainage mitigation program will also add to the demands within this department. I don't see things slowing down in the future. We've also asked for a part-time compliance officer. Eric and Chris testified about the need for enforcing civil regulations. We have unlicensed tattoo artists and hair salons and zoning violations that this governing body has asked staff to manage. This position will help our departments meet that expectation. Our top expense categories are similar to last year's budget. Payroll and benefits are 72.9% of our spending, followed by gas and electric utilities, fuel, fleet, parts and labor, the support we have for our support agencies, the one-time projects we're proposing, professional services, property and liability insurance, computer software and hardware, supplies, and the maintenance of our city assets. I would like to take just a second again to shout out to Laramie County's own Representative Dan Zwanitzer. He led the charge to raise the distribution from the $105 million that came out of the Appropriations Committee to $146 million that passed the legislature. He really understands the struggles local governments have in finding the revenues to provide even the basic services. I'd like to thank him and those legislators that approved and supported that increased funding. We've been working on the budget for more than 4 months now. Many of your city departments have been at it for much longer to prepare their budgets for their departments. I know you know this, but I want to publicly thank them, the departments, for the hard work in getting their budgets ready for our review and for the great job they did in their presentations to this committee over the last 2 weeks. I don't think you can say thank you. My magnetic personality. I don't think thank you is enough for our treasurer and her team. Robin, Brenda, and Amber have spent untold hours preparing the budget at every step of the process. The budget book they put out together gets better every year, and I find the information so helpful. Complicating the budget this year is the department is working overtime, and I mean overtime, to get the Treasury Department ready for the Open Gov conversion that will take place on July 1st. Each is a huge undertaking, but to do them simultaneously is amazing. So, Mr. President, you have the balanced budget. Your departments have worked so hard to prepare. We stand ready to answer any questions you and the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Treasurer. Everybody in your office as well, all the directors. At that, does anybody on the committee have any questions for the mayor? We'll start left to right. Go with Dr. Aldridge.
President Escobar, through you, I just want to say I really appreciate all the hard work. I know the mayor has publicly thanked all of you, but this book and the information that we receive and all of the presentations from the directors really makes this process much more transparent for us as council people and much more usable as we're answering questions from constituents. Really appreciate the diligence that has gone into seeking grants from all the different departments. We received an email from our former grant writer and now economic development. Can't even remember her whole title today. Just giving us an update on where we're at on all the grants and all the grants that have been applied for. It's only because of the diligence of our department heads and of our grant writer and those that are on the lookout for grants all the time that we're able to do as much as we can and make the public dollars go as far as that we can. So really appreciate all of the hard work that everybody has put into this and helping those of us on the council be able to really dig in and understand the needs of your departments, as well as making sure that we're getting you the things that you need in order to do your jobs. So thank you.
Dr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Mayor, just so the public understands, we recently did an in-house, I believe it was in-house survey of salaries around the area. And so this year we tried to as a result of that study, tried to bring most of our employees up to what would be considered a market rate. And I understand that. I guess my question is, in some cases, that resulted in a fairly significant raise for people. And I realize we need to be competitive, but would it, in your opinion, was, and this is maybe redundant because it's in the budget, but it seemed to me maybe it would have been better to have done that a little more gradually and not stress the budget quite as much. And so I guess I wanted your thoughts on that.
Mr. President, through you to Dr. Rennie, I really do appreciate the question that you're asking, Dr. Rennie. But I think it was really a matter of fairness. We have some employees that have worked with us for, more than 20 years. And when we looked at the salary range, from low to high, the low is 25%, the high is 75% of the market. They were at the low end of what their market rate would be at the end of their careers. And so as we looked at taking that matrix that we worked on, and we determined that what we'd like to do is every year that an employee works for the city, they work gradually up through that pay band. So when they end, if they were to stay in the same job at the end of their careers, they would be at the higher end of that pay range. So we had some employees who've been in their same job for 20, 25 years, but we're at the lowest end. And it just was out of fairness. It wasn't, I didn't feel like it was fair to leave them at that low end. If we're going to do this, we kind of had to rip the bandage off and put people where they needed to be at the beginning. And now it'll be a gradual increase as we bring people into the program. But it only seemed fair to put them where they belonged.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. And then I've been asked that at times, and I think the public deserves, needs to know what we're doing. And as I said, I agree. If we're going to attract and retain high quality employees, we need to be close to market rate. The city has a great benefit package, and not everybody considers that when they're looking at a job, and they should. But I think being close to market rate is important. I do have at least kind of one other issue with staffing. And I noticed when looking at page 32 in some of the additions, we have a greenway maintenance technician that is being paid out of the the 6 penny, essentially. Is that accurate? Our treasurer is saying yes.
Yeah, partially, yes.
All right. I have a bit of an issue with that in that when we approached the voters, when we built the conservatory at the Botanic Gardens, we did put in there a $2 million fund for maintenance that the voters approved. But I don't think at any other time did the voters think when they were voting for a special project that it was also going to include salaries or everyday maintenance in that. So I have a bit of an issue with that one. I think we need to be careful of that in the future. And if we're going to start paying salaries out of the special purpose option tax, we need to be telling the public that when they're voting on it.
Mr. President, through you to Dr. Rennie. Dr. Rennie, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I actually agree. However, in the last 6 penny sales tax, we had, I think it was $3.5 million for construction of new greenway and 2.5 for the maintenance of our current greenway. And I think staff decided that it was actually, in some cases, cheaper to actually have somebody on staff to do that than to hire outside companies to come in and do some of those maintenance things. And so we did tell the voters we were going to do maintenance, and we're doing exactly that with those dollars.
All right, Mr. President, that's all the questions I have for now. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councilman Johnson?
Okay. So going off of the same with page 32, I know that we got offered the SAFER grant, which hired the additional firefighters. And I'm kind of going back to an email you sent us in regards to basically the tail signs of us going into a recession. And so I guess, after this one starts on June 1st, are we going to start our budget meetings like pretty much in July now? So, because if our sales tax has been down for roughly around the last 3 months, as far as I can tell from what the treasurer sent out. So looking at retaining those firefighters that were paid for through the SAFER grant, then also looking at our bond balloon that's going to happen in 2028 for the parking garage. The potential, to have to put the minimum rate guarantee for the airlines. If that doesn't pass, that one taps out, that we're gonna have to start looking for funding in regards to that. And then there were several others I know that we had had kind of riding along that, that they didn't look like, that right now it looked fairly good, but I'm just worried about this, recession that we're all kind of expecting, for what we can expect as far as appropriations throughout probably the next 6 months at least, with our sales taxes keep decreasing, and what our plan is for, things like the SAFER grant and other things that we've taken on that we know we're going to have to take on those responsibilities. And then also the firefighters pension. And then if there's any turn in regards to the self-funded, I know right now, as far as the self-funded insurance, that's been, paying out fairly well. But if there's all of a sudden a turn of events that puts us, back on the high end of it, like it was when it was with Win Health, and then I think with Cigna, where we had more claims submitted than were, typically, unusual, because everyone was just going to the ER instead of urgent care. So these are costs that I've seen throughout the years that we're going to have to find out how to pay. And so I just want to kind of be prepared in case we have to do rifts again because of the way that the recession plays out. I know it probably won't be as drastic as hopefully as the pandemic, but it is items that we need to think about. And when are we going to start those discussions?
Mr. President, through you to Mr. Johnson, all good questions, sir, and I wrote them down so I could answer them for you. We're through the first year of our SAFER, so we have 2 more years before that responsibility comes, and that number will be right around $1 million to cover those 9 new positions. And we're fully anticipating that we'll have revenues to do that at that time. The city is growing. We know of a lot of really good things coming. Betsy's sitting right behind us, and she'll nod her head that there's some really good things coming that I think our revenues will continue to grow. And I'm confident that we'll be able to pay for those. The board, or you said the bond balloon, we actually have it's almost $600,000 sitting in the bank right now that's designated to go towards that balloon at the end. The bond requires that we have a reserve fund. And so it's sitting there earning interest right now. When we make that last payment, that will go towards that. And so it'll be more of a typical payment. And we have 3 payments left, Madam Treasurer? I think we have 3 payments left on that. So then we'll be free and clear on that particular item. The MRG, they're not using as much as we thought they would. So I think we have another 2 or 3 or 4 years left before that will come. And my hope will be maybe the voters would go ahead and do that again on our next 6 penny. To help us with that item. I think air service is critical for the capital city. And if we're going to have all these new businesses coming and the Sentinel project, I think air service is going to become a real critical need for that. So I believe we'll be able to pay for that. Plan A, when I first became mayor and we knew that was happening, we put 8 years of Plan A money away. At reserves, we just designated it. So we have 7 more years, I believe, or 6 more years left that we can pay for that before we'll have to put that into our budget. And our self-insurance fund, we're like $3.6 million in reserves now. So we're not where we need to be, but we're in a really good place. I think we're healthy where we are today. Our goal would be to get to about $8 million. That would be a very conservative number. Right now, I think we're in a healthy place. So if we do have a bad year, we're already fully reserved to be able to handle that. And then when it comes to just a slowdown in our economy, we're really blessed right now that we've been able to put away, in the last few years, $20-some million. And so we have great reserves. So my expectations would be that we would be able to, by managing open positions and stuff, not ever have to let anybody go during this time frame. I think we're in such a better position than we were just, in like the 2008 time frames. And when you guys went into COVID, not knowing exactly how that would be, I think we're really prepared. Rob and I have talked about it, and I think we can manage that.
Okay, so I guess following up, since you gave the 20 million number, so what is it equatable? I know we made a change in regards to on the days of reserves that we have for operations. So how many days are we currently at that we have?
So we're required to have, by our own resolution, to have 120 days of reserves.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have another 20. Oh, actually, we had that big check come in, so we're higher than that.
Yeah, so I only have it through the end of March because I haven't had a chance to do it since then, but we have 227 days currently, and that's 21,689,385 in spendable reserves. And then an additional 24,348,000 in the 120 day
And by spendable, you mean unencumbered?
unencumbered. Yeah,
Okay.
beyond the 120 days.
Okay.
This does not include the 7 million.
Mr. President, we got another check for $7 million from one of the data centers that just came in. That's not included in that number. So we're actually up closer to like 26, $27 million.
Do you
in
happen,
spendable.
do you happen to have the numbers from I guess it would kind of rolling over from 2020 to 2021. Do you have what do we have any unencumbered reserves coming out of the pandemic when we did I believe the 17 layoffs?
So in, Mr. President, we had in 2020, 68 days of reserves. And so it's grown. And every 7, let's see, is that right? Every 7 days of reserves is about $1 million.
$1 million.
Yeah.
Okay, and so roughly it was around 68 days. And at that point, what was the resolution was what, 50 days?
Was 60 days.
60 days. Okay, so it was right at the threshold. Okay.
Right.
And Mr. President, we've also bought the Beast. We spent, $4.2 million. We've made some really healthy purchases and still have unbelievably healthy reserves at this point.
Yes, sir. Go back to Dr. Rennie.
Oh, I can. Yeah, Mr. President, through you, Mr. Mayor, we've had a lot of discussions. We've had meetings on parking in the last few months. And in looking, our projected parking fine revenue has dropped from last year's budget of 162 down to 114,000, so a $48,000 estimated decrease. So is that, I guess my first question is why the decrease, or is that just bringing us more in line with what we've been doing?
Mr. President,
by
through you,
fines?
I hope that means that we're being successful. As if you remember, Captain James talked about our goal is not really to collect money, but to get people in compliance.
Moving.
And what we think is happening is, people are realizing we're more serious about, we're booting cars and we're taking this seriously. And so they're more in compliance. I believe that that's what's going on.
And Mr. President, kind of as a follow-up, more of a comment on that. I know we're doing an analysis or a study to determine whether we should go to automated parking in the downtown, specifically in the downtown area. And in looking at the fact that our estimated revenues are $114,000 and our estimated expenses are $287,000, I think it would make sense to go to an automated system and eventually phase out, some of the expenses that we're currently experiencing.
Mr. President, through you, my gut, sir, would be that we're not going to be able to get rid of those expenses because if you're not enforcing them, then compliance goes away. So my gut tells me that we'll probably still need to have the 2 full-time drivers going around and the parking manager. But having paid parking should give us more resources that we can then put back into, my hope would be increased parking opportunities downtown.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Do we have any questions from
I
any
got
members
one.
of the committee online?
No, sir, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay,
I'm
Back
good,
to
Mr.
Count-
President. Thank you.
okay, back to Councilman Johnson.
Okay, so follow up to what Dr. Rennie said in regards to that. Was some of that equated to, was it for cost? Because I had heard at least the Spiker garage that we were looking to put in an arm bar that actually was a little more restrictive in regards to people going in and out of that facility. Is that equated to why our overall cost may have been higher compared to what we expected for our revenues?
Mr. President, through you, I don't believe so, sir. We are still looking at, putting in an arm or an access arm there to make sure that the people who are going in there to park. When they go through there, when they come out, if they already have a parking pass, it'll read their license plate and let them out. And if they're not, then they can make a payment in the garage, which hopefully will make the garage more profitable, but also keep the people maybe going upstairs and spitting cookies and things like that out of the garage. That was mostly the purpose for doing that, was just to make sure that people who were going in there were going in there for the specific purpose of parking and not playing.
Any further questions before we go to public comment? Seeing none. Any member of the public have any comments they want to make to the committee? Clerk's gone right now. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment online?
No, we don't. Sorry.
Means you put together a real good budget. Okay, can I get a motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve the 2024-2025 budget as written.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilman Roybal, second from Councilman Johnson.
Mr. Chair,
Councilman Roybal.
I move to increase the City Council Department's Ward 1 discretionary account by $11,666.67. The Ward 2 discretionary account by $11,666.67, and the Ward 3 discretionary account by $11,666.66. I also move to decrease the miscellaneous department's insurance and bonding line item by $35,000. Should it be $34,999.99? Yeah.
Going out to public.
Second.
Councilman Johnson seconded.
Oh, I didn't second it, but I will for discussion.
Okay, public comment on the amendment? How about from the committee?
Yes, sir. On the sheet, it says reference page number 96 and page 178. And I can't find. Oh, is it that where it's at? Okay, one moment. Let me look this over because I had questions on this.
Councilman Laybourne?
Yes, I was, naturally, I'm a supporter of our council contingency. I'm just not sure what effect this might have on the property and liability insurance. I mean, this surely is a portion of it.
Mr. President.
Madam Treasurer?
So the property and liability insurance rate increase came in less than what we had projected in the budget, and with a savings of $35,000. So that's where that's coming in from.
I see. Thank you.
Dr. Aldrich?
Thank you, President Escobar. So I guess my concern is the $35,000 is decreasing from the miscellaneous department's insurance and bonding line. The actual amount that it's going to take to pay that remains in that line on 95 or 178. And so this is just a surplus that's being distributed amongst the 3 wards, but not moving that expense to us permanently.
Mr. President, through you, it's not, it's just moving the budget that we were going to use to pay the insurance, but when we initially, Eric had provided a figure to me, but that was a little bit over what we were going to get. So it's just moving the budget, not the expense.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I understand this clearly so that in the future, we're not committing ourselves to paying an insurance and bonding from our discretionary accounts from the council if there were to be an increase in this line item.
Mr. President, through you, that's correct. And if it's, and if it increase in cost next year, then we'll just budget more next year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other further comments from the committee? Turn your mic on.
Mr. President,
Dr. Rennie?
just for information, my information, how much did we? I don't think we spent the 20,000 each ward had in there from last year anyway, so do we have carryover from last year, or are we just starting with a flat 20K?
Mr. President, through you, I will carry those amounts over. So you have, as of today, you have 9,500 left in Ward 1 discretionary. Ward 2, you have 20,000, so nothing's been spent. Ward 3, you have 18,975.
Madam Treasurer, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
The only comment I had about that was that recently Ward 3 had spent some money on the gate that goes into the Kiwanis Park. So how will that money either be subtracted or?
I
Is it-
thought it was, I thought it was on Atlantic. I didn't know okay,
not.
it's not on Kiwanis Park, it's on Atlantic.
Mr. President, that will be deducted from those balances. And then as of July 1st, whatever is not spent in the August reappropriation, I will carry those amounts over. So you'll get that money back, anything that was not spent.
Dr. Aldrich?
President Escobar, my understanding was that's the only expense we've expended in Ward 3 was for that gate. So if you're showing an $18,000 amount at this point, I'm guessing that that's already been deducted.
President, that there was $20,000 originally. So yes, it depends on the timing of when the check was cut. When the invoice gets entered in the system. So I'm not if that was the only expenditure, then that's probably already included.
Okay. And one more question. I'm just curious as to why Ward 3 is the one that's going to take the penny shortfall.
I'll give you a penny.
35,000.
About a penny left over.
No.
We got to put it somewhere.
Yeah, I would recommend, since Ward 2 hasn't spent any of their money, maybe it should come from them.
I'll give you a penny.
Okay.
Go to online. Public comment? Call for a vote. All in favor?
No discussion?
Councilman Laybourne.
Well, I speak in favor of this action because of how Ward 1 used its contingency money. And we actually have a couple other projects I hope to discuss with my colleagues here shortly. And really the benefit that we got out of this was that when we had a situation where we needed to do some fencing in a area where there was dangerous driving, and the neighborhood was very concerned about it. It really helps to be able to go to the construction department and Doug Klon and tell them that we as council people agreed that that was appropriate use, so that when after he went through the extensive process of getting approval from the WAPA power line, we were ready to go. And I think that occasionally you have situations like that where it's really best, and I hope some of the other council people in those wards will take a look at that, because it's really best to take care of it at the time. That was what I would consider to be an emergency situation. That young man was killed there, and it also impacted the greenway that was immediately adjacent. People were driving where they shouldn't. And so it was really helpful to be able to go and say, look, when you're ready and when you've got the approval from the corporation or entity that has the easement, then we can just do it. Rather than saying, well, why don't you get ready and then we'll go find the money? Because this really was, in my opinion, an emergency situation. And then there's also certainly, we're looking at a gate similar to what Ward 3 is doing. And it's just pretty effective to be able to have the folks that are responsible, seek some prices and just do it. We're not talking about a lot of money, but I do think that it has its place and it was proven in Ward 1. So it isn't, I really want to emphasize, this isn't anybody's slush fund. This is about doing our job and helping with these unusual situations. So I certainly speak in favor of this because of the fact that it really won't, it's unexpended funds that can go to that purpose. And if another ward doesn't spend their money, so much the better. But there are unique needs in Ward 1 and we want to meet them. Thank you.
Dr. Rennie? Councilman Johnson?
Okay. So Robin, can you help me with the math and how this transition is going to go? So what was the current amount left over from Ward 3? It was 18,000.
Mr. President, through you, it's 18,975.
Okay. So it was $1,025 for the gate. So of the $20,000 that's projected in the 2025 budget, is of that 20,000, is some of it the 18,975, or is this an additional 20,000 that's going to be awarded?
Mr. President, through you, that's an additional.
Okay, so that takes us up to
38,000
38.
plus another
plus 11,000.
48, 49.
So yeah, so $50,641, and that's just our ward, and then of course it would decrease for Ward 1. That's an interesting proposition, since we just got our request put in last month for a request, and now, and we only spent 1,000 or $1,025 out of 12 calendar months, and now we're up to $50,000.
Mr. Chair. We
Councilman
would,
Roybal?
in Ward 1, I agree with my compatriot, Ward 1. We do have some needs, some interesting needs because of the portion of the city that we represent and some of the structures and the creek that runs through. So I am wholeheartedly behind this, but if the other two wards want to give up some cash, we're okay with it. We can use it.
President Escobar.
Dr. Aldrich?
Through you to my other colleague in Ward 3, one of the conversations that we've had is that it'd be nice to be able to have more money to do larger projects. So I don't think it's a matter that this won't be expended. I think it's just a matter that we need to identify those, and some of those were not doable with the 20,000, but will be doable with the larger amounts. So while Ward 1 has some unique challenges, so does Ward 3. And you'll have to talk to Ward 2 about donations rather than Ward 3.
Any final comments?
Yes, sir.
Councilman Johnson?
So going back to our initial discussion in regards to where this is being pulled from, so do you see any issues over the next fiscal year where all of a sudden the ward money was increased, to $50,000 roughly? I'm just using our example where you would have to backfill from another account if we were to, work off or for the miscellaneous department insurance and bonding line item. Do you see anything in the future where you'd have to, find other funding because it was allocated tonight?
Mr. President, through you, are you referring to we won't have enough money in the property and bonding?
Well, yeah, that's pretty much. So what we're doing is a decrease of the miscellaneous departments, insurance and bonding. Okay, so if anything like what Dr. Aldrich said, so in the next fiscal year, if all of a sudden something comes up with this bonding line item, is it going to be difficult to find another revenue stream to backfill that, since this was allocated to the wards?
Mr. President, through you, we already know what that's going to cost for the year, so we're fine for the fiscal year
So we're
25.
good.
Fiscal year 26, it's another situation, but.
Okay, all righty, thank you.
Mr. President,
Madam Clerk?
Councilman White has his hand raised.
Councilman White, go ahead. We're on the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. And I couldn't support my colleague from Ward 1, Mr. Laybourne, or Mr. Roybal more. I think Ward 1 has been a very good steward historically of the contingency funds. But I would really caution going above the 20K mark. Perhaps perhaps we can backfill each ward's amounts to 20K, and then if there is a larger project that our colleagues want to tackle with a larger amount, maybe we can look at adding upon that at a later date. I remember that ward contingency funds were $10,000, and then we've gone up to $20,000, and I'm comfortable at the 20K mark. In Ward 1, we're always going to have projects to spend this money on, very worthwhile projects that constituents bring to us all the time. I just worry about going above that mark. It seems to me if you go above 20 or 25K, it's a bad look. So maybe you can get Ward 3 can get a quote on one of the larger projects that was mentioned, and then we can look at adding to that when there's a concrete cost estimate. But that's just my opinion.
And my only comment about that is it's just a little more difficult to move that money. And it's like Councilman Laybourne says, when issues come up and we want to get something done, it moves government faster. Just recently at our council and coffee meeting this past Saturday, many of our constituents in Ward 3 were very appreciative of the gate on Atlantic and the issue that we were able to take care of in the timely manner in which we took care of it. And I think my vision is that we have a lot of these projects in our community and that we want to see these projects move forward at a faster rate.
President Escobar.
Dr. Aldrich.
I can sure appreciate Councilman White's concern about how this would look, but I think that our constituents in our wards understand that there are projects that they want to see done, like the gate on Atlantic. Had a conversation today where we really need to have a gate behind Menards because there's a lot of illegal dumping going on where people are being able to access that and go in there and camp. And that it would be helpful to have another gate there. So I think having the flexibility to be able to do that, costs keep increasing. We've heard from almost every single department that they've had increases in expenses. And I think that as long as our constituents and the public knows that this money is being spent in our wards to make those decisions, I actually think they might be more supportive of this type of spending than they might be of our general budget spending. And I think that just because we were thrifty and didn't spend all of our money doesn't mean that we should go back to just the $20,000. So I would argue against that means of just starting with $20,000 each year. We will get our spent, there's no doubt in my mind, in a timely fashion.
Any further comments from members of the committee?
Mr. President, Councilman Seagrave has his hand raised.
Councilman Seagrave, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excuse me. I tend to agree with Councilman White. I just don't see increasing this when we're not using the funds that are currently available. I don't think there's a need. And in the effort for transparency, I just don't think this is a needed item. I would rather leave it in the general fund reserves and come use it if we need it. So this would be difficult for me to support. Thank you.
Councilman Roybal.
Mr. Chair. So again, in Ward 1, we have some deeds there. And with compliance, adding two more uh, two more inspectors for the homeless. I think that if they come to us and say, hey, we need this, this, and this, it'll be a lot easier for us to fund it out of Ward 1 contingency than to go through the general council and do, 6 meetings to get it done. So if they come in and say, hey, we need $10,000 to do this, we can roll the money out of our contingency fund. And I see a couple of the other council people nodding their head because that's what we're hiring these guys for.
Dr. Rennie?
Mr. President, it is not that difficult to move money out of the, you guys are making it sound like it's a difficult task to move money out of reserves and reappropriate it. We reappropriate every 2 weeks at every council meeting, and often it goes through on consent. So that is not a big deal.
Call for the
President?
question. Councilman Laybourne.
Well, I think the point has been made, and having worked with compliance and totally being very, very pleased that we are increasing their staff and knowing those often very, very difficult abandoned properties, camps that are dangerous. There's a need there, and I understand that there's different ways to approach it, but I believe that we'll be responsible with this, and we'll have needs, and we'll be bringing them to the body if there's a report that's necessary or some sort of action, we'd be glad to take it. But I really want to emphasize there are dangerous situations that department is going to be bringing to us that are going to need attention in a timely manner. So either way, certainly glad to have this discussion, but I'm certainly in favor of doing this, and we can review it at some later point. But I think that the other councilman from Ward 1 makes a very valid point that has, and I understand it has effects in the other wards as well, but has big effects in Ward 1. Thank you.
All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no.
Can I see the hands of the
No.
noes, please?
No.
Tom, I heard you as a no, and Jeff, I heard you as a no. Is that correct?
Councilman Rennie, a no.
That's correct.
That's correct. Correct.
Thank you.
3 noes, the amendment is passed. Back on the main motion. Are there any other amendments?
Mr. President,
Dr. Rennie?
I have another question. It took me a while to find it in the book. So if you'd permit me, I have a question on the transit fund, or 2 questions.
Go ahead.
And first question is, I noticed professional services line item went up from the previous year, doubled, and I was hoping I could get an explanation on that.
Can you say which page you're on?
Oh, page 217, pardon me.
Vicky Nemechek, Public Works. I believe that is fair. Those are the passenger counters. I believe it's software.
Okay. All right.
I can check that. Just to make
Okay.
sure.
And then the other question I have for Director Nemechek is, recently I had the opportunity, one of the instructors, one of the teachers at Central, in one of his classes had students come up with ideas to improve their community. And one of the questions was, why is there so little publicity on our transit system? And when I looked into that, actually, I really liked his presentation. When I looked into it, we only, at least the previous year, had only spent $1,000 on advertising. And I can't even see advertising in here now, and I was hoping maybe that's what professional services was for. But how do we expect? I mean, I kind of know about the system, but honestly, I don't know where the routes go in my neighborhood. So how do we expect people to find that out and use our system when we spend so little to publicize it?
Vicky Nemechek, Public Works, through you, Chair, to Dr. Rennie. We actually, that advertising line item is for contracts that we have to advertise for the paper. So that's not where that advertising budget would come from. It would, but I think you're right. We probably could do a better job. We do have, all of our buses have on the buses, they say public transportation, have a phone number. We do have, you can Google the bus system when you, if you want to take a bus to somewhere, you can use Google to do that. It just like you Google your car, it'll give you the directions of how to get somewhere on public transportation. So those things are available, but we could probably do a better job of doing some advertising and some media.
All right. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Mr. President. I would tell my colleagues to consider the next 2 weeks that maybe we should pad that advertising budget and maybe make the public more aware of what our system offers.
And Dr. Aldrich,
No.
Councilman Johnson.
So going on the publicity in regards to transit, the only publicity I usually hear is when, of course, something goes bad. And so, and it just happened to happen last week where I guess now, as far as negative publicity, we have where the Committe shelter used to have it on the south side of Lincoln Way. And now the bus stops on the north side by the Microtel. And so people are now having to run across Lincoln Way to go to the bus stop. And so when these types of decisions are made, really, that's why I say I want to hear negative publicity. And so and I know like what we just had in our previous discussion in regards to Ward 1 contingency and the amount of projects. The one thing I'm worried about is I've already had safety concerns in regards to elderly and disabled people now having to run the gauntlet across Lincoln Way over to the bus stop. And so I guess now that we moved the bus stop over there, we're going to have to look for a Hawk system, but that's a state highway / Lincoln Highway. That's going to probably be more difficult to work with YDOT to do something like that to deal with safety.
Vicky Nemechek, Public Works, through you, Chair. I would say that there is a traffic signal with pedestrian crosswalks right not far from the Committe shelter. That really is what
The Snyder, are you talking about? Because there's
not
nothing
Snyder,
on the
next
west.
one, but Ames. At Ames and there's one at Missile, there's one at Ames. Underpass.
At the Eagle's Nest, right? But that's
Mrs. Drive comes in right before the bridge on Lincoln Way. There's a car lot there on the corner and MSI across street.
okay. Yeah, I know usually people go by the path of least resistance. And so
It's a
Yeah.
block.
The transit development plan went through all of those routes. Individually, we've implemented all 4 routes. We can look at it, but it would make a difference in our 30-minute back and forth, which is what our primary goal was in our transportation development plan, was to have 30-minute bus headways. In order to move it to the other side, we would probably have to go back to the hour headways to make it work.
Dr. Aldrich.
Councilman Escobar, I actually believe that as a body, we approved that transportation plan. So it's a little late now.
Chair, through you, it's not impossible to go back and look after we've done something that does make any sense. So if we have done something that does make any sense, we'll go back and take a look.
Any further comments? Back on the main motion, any comments from the committee? Online? Okay, like recommendation,
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Laybourne.
so this is about my last chance to make a comment, is it not?
Yes, it is
Well,
on this reading.
having been through 12 of these budgets in my career here, the difference is, as I go way back when it was totally a mystery. And certainly the ups and downs that we've been through are have been difficult and are hard to overcome sometimes. I think of a old statement about politics and government. And that statement is that it is the art of the possible. And that's what I see this budget as being. It is possible to increase a few positions. It is possible to put those reserves away. It is possible to look at what we overcame in the recent past and peer into the challenging future. But this is a very understandable document and one that I think balances those considerations in a really good way. We're not having departments having their usual differences about who gets what. And I would also point out that here we are setting the financial future of our city, and we have no public comment in an era of real questions about government. So I'm certainly in support of it, and I believe that a lot of work went into it, and certainly some of the things that I see that are going to progress here and that the mayor mentioned are true needs and being approached in the correct way. So, and of course, has been noted here earlier, we can always make adjustments, but as a basic document, this certainly is the best one I've ever seen. And I think that when we adopt it, we'll be able to explain it. And I think that it's something I actually can say I'm proud of. And so that's a very comforting thing to be able to say. So thanks to all. And I think we ought to adopt it and work with what's in it and continue our progress. Thank you.
Any other final comments before we vote? All in favor of the committee of the whole, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. The recommendation from the committee of whole will be to approve the ordinance on second reading as amended at the next meeting of the governing body. Being there is no further items on the agenda for this meeting, we are adjourned.